We're in that weird time of the offseason where, to be frank, there's not too much movement among NFL teams. And a lot of the talk going on right now is off the field issues that are also holding up a potential quarterback domino shuffle, more specifically with Baker Mayfield and Jimmy G. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a group of people that are still on the market that have given themselves the opportunity to be patient. Veterans of the game who don't need mini camp or as much offseason work as these younger guys do, and they can sit back and patiently wait for teams to make all their moves before they start the season to make their move and be a huge impact player that will more than likely be on a championship team. These are guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Ndamukong Suh, Julio Jones, Trey Flowers, all these guys who aren't the key piece anymore, but that can still be a key piece on a championship team. And so in today's video, we're going to talk about all of these guys, and not only talk about all of the possible organizations that make the most sense for them, but where we think they should go and explain why. And at the end, I'm very curious to see if you guys agree or if you think I missed a team that would be even better. There's obviously a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. And we're going to start off this list with one of the more polarizing players, Odell Beckham Jr. He joined the Rams in November of last year after being released by the Browns mid-season, and there were high expectations going in. There were some obvious growing pains as he was figuring out the McVay offense and building a connection with Stafford, but this was short-lived and he became a huge part of their playoff success, and many think that he would have been the Super Bowl MVP if it wasn't for him coming down with an ACL tear late in the second quarter of that game. And this is far from an exaggerated extension of gratitude for what he did for the team to make him feel good. It was true. How that game was going, the game plan for the Bengals was clear, and what they did to sacrifice to make that game plan happen was leaving OBJ one-on-one a lot of the time, and most of the time regretting it. He wasn't the first option on this team, and with his talents and reputation is insane to say, but he was able to thrive being the secondary option to the Triple Crown and Yak leader in Cooper Kupp, which is why I think it makes all the sense for him to figure out another deal with the Rams. Him being different than all other players on this list, he's not going to be able to play week one. So firstly, he needs to be on the team that can make the playoffs without him. And secondly, it's not ideal for him to go through the growing pains and building a connection with another quarterback, especially when that would be happening in such critical games late in the season. McVay talked about how special the relationship was on multiple podcasts, and him, Kupp, and Stafford seem to really enjoy each other and feed off each other's competitiveness. So when making this video, I decided to put one first because this is the only one on the list that really doesn't have another option that makes a ton of sense because of their previous success together and a lot to do with his injury. I imagine him staying in LA trying to recreate the magic they had last year on another one-year deal, with more than likely this time not taking it half in Bitcoin because that didn't seem to go to plan. But now that we have probably one of the most obvious ones out of the way, this leads me to the next person we're going to talk about. Another Super Bowl champion, but this time will definitely not be going back to his old team, Ndamukong Suh. Suh flat out said his time in Tampa was over, and this was all but confirmed when they signed Akeem Hicks to the Bears not too long after. But what does the 35-year-old former number 2 overall pick have to offer, and which team makes most sense for him to join? Well, firstly, any team that gets Suh is getting an Iron Man. He has only missed 2 games in his entire 12-year career, which is almost unheard of. So teams should expect 17 plus games of production from this signing. But this team would also be getting a disruptor. He's not the guy he once was, obviously, but his consistency to let offensive lines, running backs, and quarterbacks feel all 300 pounds of pure rage for all 4 quarters has never changed. He will immediately improve your team's interior defensive run and still manage to get around 6 sacks a year. But as far as the teams he should go to, I really think this depends if he's going to be going after the money or rings. And what I mean by this is he's not in his prime anymore. He's not going to get a max deal, and he's not going to become the highest paid defensive player in the league like he was with the Dolphins years back. It's hard to picture him going the money route because his MO of his late was following Brady to the Bucs, and I'm guessing he's going to be happier in a great situation competing in meaningful January football. So with that being said, the first option we're going to look at is the Las Vegas Raiders. Not only did they make a huge signing with Davante Adams to pair with Derek Carr, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow, and adding a 5-time Super Bowl champion as a head coach, but they also beefed up their defensive line by acquiring Chandler Jones to line up across from breakout star Max Crosby. And Suh has been outspoken for this to be his personal favorite. He spoke about how the AFC West is so tough, and if you make it out, you're all but destined for a Super Bowl, which to me is a decent thought, but this maybe ignorantly discludes other teams like the Bills, Bengals, and Ravens. He went on to talk about how he already spoke with Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, and that is a huge part of this. Throughout a lot of Suh's career, he has been double teamed, and having him in the middle, he's either going to take a lot of the attention away from Crosby and Jones, or he will be the one getting the favorable one-on-one matchups. And this makes a lot of sense, but it's not the only place to consider. We also have to look at other teams like the Browns, which makes a lot of sense on paper, but on paper doesn't include the current dysfunction going on in their organization. While Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney offer a very similar 1-2 punch that he would get in Vegas, the instability at the quarterback position makes them a huge question mark. And unless the money is way better than Vegas, I don't see this one being as likely. But another team to consider is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals is another one that comes to mind because he could be a featured piece on this defensive line, on a very good team with a lot of great culture, and obviously in the discussion to make another Super Bowl run as they only improved their team this offseason. But why I don't think this option is as likely either is it might sound absurd, but if we're really going on our best guesses here, I don't see Cincinnati being a place he'd want to go play at age 35. His last 3 teams he played on was in Miami, Los Angeles, and Tampa. It's hard to picture him going to a team that he might have just as good as a chance to win as some others, but in cold Ohio on a young team without a practice facility. Now that might sound outlandish or straying too far away from football, but with so many good options out there, he has the right to get the best of all worlds, which brings us to the last team we're going to look at, and this would be him returning to a place he's played already. But no, like we mentioned earlier, not the Bucs, but back to the Rams where he played for 1 season in 2018. This makes a lot of sense as he'd be in a great situation lining up at the same line as Aaron Donald, possibly the greatest defensive player ever. But since they signed Donald, they also had to let go of Sebastian Joseph Day, so there is room on this Rams to add more depth to the defensive line, and they are also on the top of the board when it comes to preseason odds-on favorites to win it all. So, at the end of the day, my money would be on a 2-man race between the Rams and the Raiders. 2 teams ready to compete and win now. Great situations playing-wise for a defensive lineman. And even though I would love to see him on the Rams again with Aaron Donald, but this time on a team led by Stafford, I think his outward praise for the Raiders is telling enough that he's willing and able to handpick his next team where he wants to go on a cheaper deal to chase another ring. Even though I think the Rams give him a better chance to win it all, as he did mention how tough it is in the AFC West is going to be this year, I don't think it's going to be a mistake by any means if he chooses the Raiders, because I think they can absolutely make the playoffs again. And it seems like he already loves the idea of playing with 2 stud edge rushers. And also, Suh in black and silver already sends shivers of fear down my spine all the way to where I live in South Florida. So the Raiders are going to be my pick of where I think he's going to sign, but the Rams is where I think he should go if he really wants another ring. And moving on to keep the trend going back and forth on sides of the ball, let's talk about wide receiver Julio Jones. Maybe one of the most mind-boggling what happened, as he seemed to change overnight. He went from, my opinion, the best receiver in the NFL for a good 5 to 6 year stretch, and having one injury to another one last year, but never having a game where he quite looked like he did in Atlanta. I don't think he's done at a player at all. Hopefully this injury bug leaves and he can stay healthy, and maybe Tennessee wasn't the best fit. And looking back on it, it probably wasn't, just with their team scheme and Ryan Tannehill. But where should he go? Starting with the option that seems so obvious it almost hits you in the face and likely to happen, but maybe not the best overall, is the Indianapolis Colts. Firstly, the wide receiver position for the Colts is a need, and they have a first-year quarterback coming in. Not only is this team ready to compete now with their defense, their offensive line, their running game, but they also have a quarterback that can pull it off now in Matt Ryan. So why not bring in Julio, the guy he broke all these records with and he has such an amazing connection with? This could be a day one install, while Ryan continues to build connections with Michael Pittman, T.Y. if he stays, and rookie Alec Pierce. He can use Julio as a safety blanket, as they already spent a decade together sharing the same mind and giving defenses nightmares. The run game can take a lot of pressure off of them as a whole, but this might be just what Julio needs to show glimpses of his dominance back in Atlanta. But another team I think he could be a likely match with is the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers shows no sign of slowing down as he continued to age, coming off of back-to-back MVP seasons. He just lost his favorite target in Devontae Adams, but they did draft Christian Watson and sign Sammy Watkins. But where Rodgers thrives is playing with smart football players. People who are able to adjust the route just because they're reading the defense in the same way. Without saying a word, they can make audibles and be on the same page. And with Rodgers' accuracy, he's going to give you the best chance to come down with the ball and run after the catch. He makes everyone around he plays with better. And if Julio is looking to compete for a championship and put up good numbers, taking his talents further and further north as he progresses throughout his career all the way to Lambeau Field might just be the solution. And also, moving on, I haven't heard anyone talk about these teams, but for very similar reasons, I think the Eagles and the Broncos make a lot of sense. Both really talented teams with young, talented receiving cores where he could step in, be a veteran mentor, and also make big contributions being the third option. I think the Eagles are more similar to the Titans, being a more run-dominant team, and with this RPO-style offense, it might be more limited to Julio's super wide route tree. But the Broncos with Russell Wilson would be fantastic. Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Albert O, Greg Dulcich. Adding Julio would be a very sneaky way of bringing in a familiar DK Metcalf-like target for Russell's days in Seattle, while also being on an offense where he's likely going to be able to sling the ball all over the field and straight drop back passes and play action. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't need to overthink things or make things more complicated than they need to be. Even though all four teams we mentioned have merit in being a great landing spot for Julio's 12th season, I think he hated his situation in Atlanta by the end of it, but I think he always loved his quarterback, Matt Ryan. He would likely have the biggest role on this Colts team out of any of the teams we mentioned, and he can be the glass slipper to the Colts Cinderella and be just what they needed to boost their efficiency on offense in moving the chains and putting the ball in the end zone. And finally, rounding off our list, we have a great pass rusher who is also a free agent, but likely hasn't been picked up due to injury concerns and has only played 14 games in his last 2 seasons combined. And that guy is Trey Flowers. After spending 4 years in New England, he finally got paid, signed a 5-year deal with the Detroit Lions, but after having 1 season of New England-like production, he followed it up with 2 injury-ridden seasons, and finally, the Lions ended up releasing him. And now we have an interesting spot. We have a guy that's going into his 29-year-old playing season, and being a pass rushing specialist, a premier position in the NFL up for grabs, he will likely be up for the cheap because of his injuries. This just reeks of a classic Patriots pickup where they let a star player go and then they get him back a few years later for pennies on the dollar and then magically just turn back the clock and get amazing production out of them. It's a story as old as time, so we definitely have to consider this as a likely option. But let's dig into a few other possible scenarios that where he could go. And Trey Flowers is going to be different than any of these guys on this list because he's the youngest out of the 4 people we've talked about so far. I don't think he's in a spot quite yet where he can just start ring chasing right away, so we're we're not going to talk about best fit first because I think a team come start of the season is going to take a risk on Flowers and give him a multi-year deal, looking for make a more formidable defense and hoping he stays healthy. There's not as much to break down with that considering these teams because it's not about best fit or makes a ton of sense or where he's most likely to win, but teams like the Texans and the Falcons might make a move on Flowers. They have enough cap space and it is a need for their roster. I like this for Flowers. I would love to see him get his bag up, but let's say he doesn't go this route. Let's say he wants to compete and take a pay cut. Even though I do think he'll end up taking where he'll get the most money, let's explore anyways before we wrap things up. The first team is the Arizona Cardinals. We talked about Chandler Jones earlier on, and obviously this left a void, and now JJ Watt is holding it down as the sole elite pass rusher on this team. And just like the AFC West, the NFC West has 3 teams that are ready to go. So this is definitely a likely option. Another team that's going to look to add depth to their edge rushing room is the Kansas City Chiefs. They already have Frank Clark, and they just drafted George Karlaftis, but the Chiefs have never shied away from bringing in more talent when they have, quote, enough already. But the team in my eyes that I can see making a move, pay him a decent amount of money, and has a really good chance of winning is a new team on the map and yet another AFC West team that we're going to talk about. I haven't heard any noise about this making a move, but I think the Denver Broncos would be a great fit for Trey Flowers. It's definitely a need for the team, and even though we cannot deny the talents of Bradley Chubb, we can also not deny that he's been hurt 2 out of his 4 years. So I think he'll go in the end of the day to the team that offers him the most money, but I think the Broncos would be a great fit for him. Okay, that was a lot. But this is only the start of the conversation because this is all just what I think. Let me know what you guys think. If you think there's a team I missed or you think I got things wrong, let me know. And if there's other free agents you'd like me to cover, I would definitely not mind making a part 2 of this video if there's enough interest. Make sure to like this video if you like videos like these. Make sure to comment down below what you think and what all these players are going to end up on. And as always, make sure to subscribe if you enjoy daily sports content. Thank you guys so much for checking out the channel, and as always, I will see you all tomorrow. Peace.